Ready when you are.
Hello, listeners. Hello, viewer. This is Matt again, with just a quick reminder as to what we've been doing on I'll Explain Later over the last few weeks. This is the last of 3 episodes that we've cut from a recording that we made back in 2019 that we thought was lost to the ages when I poured a cup of coffee over my laptop. This was from back when we were doing monthly episodes, but with 3 stories per month, and it's the last of our creature feature series. This week we are looking at the web planet. As with the last few episodes, we weren't recording video back in 2019, so this is audio only. But otherwise, sit back and enjoy our 6-year-old review of the web planet. So we conclude our creepy crawly special this month with a trip all the way back to 1965. We got 13th of February through to the 20th of March 1965 for the Web Planet, which is from Doctor Who's second season of original Doctor Who. And this is...
As opposed to what?
What?
Original Doctor Who.
Original Doctor Who.
Oh, you mean like
as in
not New Who?
As in not New Who.
Oh, as you were. Is that what we call it? Original Doctor Who?
Oh, I don't know, actually. I'm second guessing myself. No, it was always called Classic Who, but...
I thought you meant like supermarket knockoff Who.
Oh, I see.
As opposed to that.
Taste the difference, Doctor
yeah,
Who.
Yeah, no.
Butcher's Choice,
Whereas
Doctor
this
Who.
is fully branded Doctor Who.
Yeah.
Okay, so as you were, you confused me, that's all.
Let's just call it Doctor Who.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, yeah.
There weren't parallel series running in 1965.
I thought there was like a Never Say Never Again style thing going on.
Well, but this is something of a landmark in that the very first episode of this was the most watched episode of Doctor Who in the 1960s.
13.5 million.
13.5 million, which is a lot of people.
I want to know what was on the other side.
And it did hold its audience into the tens throughout. It's not like that the following week of... people came back for their weekly slice of action on Vortis to find out what was happening.
No, they did. Indeed, it hit 13 million again. It dipped to 13 point. So it was 13.5 first episode, then 12.5, 12.5, 13, 12. Final episode 11.5, which may tell its own story.
Well, yeah, it's interesting because this is a story that continues to divide opinion to this day, but obviously sits somewhere in the public memory as a lot of people watched this.
What's it about?
Let me tell you what it's about, John.
Matthew.
So,
you had one job.
Yeah, sorry, I got.
To be fair, I interrupted you. Go on.
Yeah, thanks.
No, please go on.
So the TARDIS is drawn fresh from their encounter with the Romans. The TARDIS crew are drawn to the planet of Vortis.
Now that's a starting point in a Doctor Who story, being the TARDIS being grabbed and that they just haven't used enough. I think it's a really good way to just get boom straight into the action. Well, really like that.
If we ever need to do a special that we want to theme that needs to wrap up 3 completely disparate stories, like when they got to the real arse end of the DVD release schedule and they would release what was it, The King's Demons and a Hartnell historical and call it something like Earth Tales, something as like with the that's not going to work.
TARDIS, the TARDIS scoop box set.
some it's been drawn off course. Anyway, so the TARDIS is drawn to the planet of Vortis, and Vortis is not a particularly hospitable place, as the Doctor and Ian discover when they venture outside in order to investigate what's going on.
Well, it's not good for your eyesight, is it? Clearly.
It's not good for your eyesight. Everything goes a bit blurry, and they have to wear those rather snazzy space anoraks at the start, although they take those off fairly rapidly. But on Vortis...
them taking those jackets off is kind of like after Watershed Doctor Who Nights kind of...
And Ian really slings his to one side, doesn't he?
Yeah, he's not happy wearing that, is he?
We'll slip these off.
So they arrive on the planet Vortis.
They arrive on the planet Vortis. Vortis is not a very hospitable place. It's a very desolate wilderness where the seas run with acid. But crucially, they're arriving in the middle of a conflict between some giant ants and some giant moths.
Seas is a bit generous. They're more
it's more of a pond, isn't it? A puddle.
A puddle.
Yes. No, well, it's later explained that water once... This was a great floral world, wasn't it? But now it's run dry. Because there is this conflict between the Zarbi, who are these giant race of ants, and the Menoptera, who, as discussed earlier, are perhaps giant moths or flies. We haven't quite worked this out. And it turns out that the Zarbi have been enslaved by the Animus, which is this spooky force that seems to be able to control them and is determined to run the planet to its own ends and keep the Menoptera, who are the dominant species, under. Keep them under the thumb. It's a fairly thin plot. I think
you've stretched it out.
Yeah, I know exactly,
and indeed so do they.
So do they. Some considerable length. But this story's reputation, I think, rests on the fact that it was a real attempt to go for it with the special effects back in the day.
Yeah,
there are no humanoid characters in this apart from the TARDIS crew, and that is I don't know if it still stands for modern Doctor Who, but certainly in classic Doctor Who, it's the only story where that is the case, where the regulars are the only non-alien creatures. But clips of it often turn up on worst special effects of all time programs, where you drag out something old and have a laugh of it because things were worse in the olden days. Let's see if we can find something to love in it. John, did you like the Web Planet?
No.
Okay.
I didn't like it.
Okay.
But I would take real issue with anybody laughing at the special effects and so on. I can see why people would find it a little bit amusing, because you can see that there's suits and costumes and so on, but they are so lovingly made. And they're so fully committed. Everyone in it is so fully committed.
I think the production's what saves this, to be honest.
Yeah,
it doesn't save it because it's terrible. But
but the production and the production values and the look of it and the fact that they've really gone the extra mile. I mean, just the flying Menoptera.
I wish they'd done that more often, because actually the when the Menoptera, was it the Spearhead, arrives? So
yes.
their attempt to reclaim their planet from the moon that they've been hiding out on, and the Menoptera fly in with their wings in all their glory. It looks fantastic.
It does look great, and that they use the kind of taking off once or twice in the rest of the serial, and it's really lovely. I love the design. We've already exchanged a message earlier about the insect movement choreography being...
Insect Movement by Rosalind de Winter, who also plays Vrestin in this.
She does. And...
I've only ever seen her described online as a noted choreographer, but I don't know. I couldn't find any history of dance. So
and indeed I couldn't find any evidence of her having choreographed anything else. But that probably says more about the.
It's a hell of a performance she gives as Vrestin as well. I don't know what the accent is, but
I just think that there's a full commitment from everyone involved.
Yeah,
and
100%.
No one is right down to the kind of devolved Menoptera.
The Optera,
the Optera, with the guy who seemed to be led by Papa Lazarou.
I mean those accents are really.
We're not going up there now. We don't go up there now. No, it's too light. We don't like the light. Hello, Dave. It's it does.
But then the Menoptera themselves also talk like. I remember. Do you remember at school when we did the Canterbury Tales and they brought in the teacher put on that audio book of someone giving the very spirited Middle English.
I am a rude man.
Go then be the way. And then it's like that's exactly what all of the Menoptera are doing. As well.
You end up sounding oddly kind of Eastern
Welsh.
European Welsh.
Yes.
Yeah, it's really odd. Along with Martin Jarvis.
Yeah, now which one is Martin Jarvis?
So he is the really annoying one who arrives with the spearhead,
right,
and constantly wants to be in charge of everything. And the other ones the more sensible ones who've been enslaved, have to sort of talk him down and say, no, we should trust the
Right.
Doctor. And he's like, no, I led this thing. I'm going to bring my... I can't remember his name, Illyrio or something.
I mean, normally this is Martin Jarvis in his...
Sorry, no, Illyrio is a Game of Thrones character. It's Hilio. Yeah, he plays Hilio.
I think because, I mean, this is Martin Jarvis's TV debut here.
Is it?
Yeah. And I would have thought, I mean, given that we saw him a few months ago in Vengeance on Varos, where we were full of praise for the fact that he was a proper actor doing a really decent turn in that.
Yes.
He's a very, very good actor. And I thought, because the makeup doesn't really allow for much, it's not immediately obvious which one he is. I thought that the performance might mark him out. Did you clock him? I didn't.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I thought his voice was quite distinctive. It didn't look like him. I haven't seen him look quite like that. But yeah, I thought he was... Anyway, I would not... I'd go as far as to say, if you're going to take anything from watching this, it's probably going to be the production. I mean, they really commit. The Zarbi, the ant characters, those costumes are fantastic.
They're really good.
And the little arms.
They're really good, yeah.
The little arms also are quite...
At the front, that sort of snatch at things.
Yeah, and sort of boss people along and that kind of stuff. I really love them.
And that's a lovely little detail that that happens, that comes out in the script. I mean, obviously we'll come on to the script, and I think that's where a lot of the problems of this sort of lie. But in terms of the world building that they've attempted to do, Ian says to the Doctor at one point, they're basically insects, right? And the Doctor says yes, but clearly the ecological conditions on Vortis mean that is the form of life that is best suited to being the dominant species here, which is such an elegant little sort of bit of Darwinism that's just dropped in as it's a real sort of hard science thing here. It's like, yeah, some planets will be so different that, the ants can be the dominant species because they'll be better suited to the environment.
Yeah.
And that's such it's a really clever and elegant little way to explain what's going on. But yeah, go on. Sorry, carry on.
No, not at all. I don't have much more to say on the production side or anything.
It's fucking boring, isn't it?
This is the most.
Boring.
Up against quite a bit of competition. This is the most boring Doctor Who I've ever seen.
It's so glacial. It's like it's this beautiful setup. It's this it's so lovingly realised, and everyone is fully committed to delivering this. And I think to the point where I don't think it looks stupid. I don't sit here and go, "Oh, this is crap." It's like it's got this weird hallucinogenic quality to it at times, and bits of it are beautifully directed.
We talked about the filming, the Vaseline on the lens to make everything look creepy outside, and you do tire of that effect by episode 6, where you're going, I just can't see.
No,
but it is a nice idea, which it deployed in a different context. Or even in this context, but for fewer episodes in a story that's good, would be
just punishingly boring.
Yeah,
and
I know we often talk about 6-parters. Blah blah blah. The pace of television has changed, but
I think if you did this on 1.25 times the setting, as a little bit of inside baseball occasionally when we're listening to the audio reconstructions, we've been known to do that in the past.
Yeah, and if we ever are found to be saying things like it zips along at a pace, it's probably
yes, for something that's only available on audio.
To the extent that I'm annoyed this wasn't lost.
Yeah.
Because I'm sad they found it.
But can you imagine listening to this on audio? I mean, actually, I'm going to immediately interrupt myself here and say that it's one thing I will also say about the production is that you realise how much attention at this point in Doctor Who's history was given to the sound of the show.
Oh, absolutely.
I think there are better examples of it in Hartnell-era Doctor Who. It's something that gets forgotten about so quickly, but just atmospheric noises, drones, the way the music could
just
be diegetic sounds, it could be, there's a sort of that sort of real concrete kind of avant-garde music that is in there.
Well, funny you should say concrète, because of course the stock music used was by Les Structures Sonores.
Yes.
And you were saying earlier that
Well, they were an avant-garde French operation who made their music using, I think it was tape manipulations of them sort of rubbing various glass tubes in order to create this kind of glassy, weird, atmospheric sort of droning. Yeah. But they were, and actually, please, someone write in to tell me if this is true or just apocrypha. But the apocryphal story is that Verity Lambert wanted them to do the TV, to do the Doctor Who theme, and for whatever reason they couldn't. So Ron Grainer and Delia Derbyshire cooked up the classic theme that we know and love. But there are some. It has been suggested in some quarters that Les Structures Sonores actually wrote a Doctor Who theme which wasn't used, and in others that just they never got round to it. But yeah, so I mean, it's stock music. It's not been specially composed for this, but it just sits in that world of atmospheric sound, and the fact that the Zarbi can only make those sort of weird electronic clicks and beeps. I mean, that it grates enormously over 6 episodes, and that's why I'm glad that we're not just listening to that. We can also see the, I think genuinely brilliant suits.
I'm jesting because I know
I know, but it was a note of like I'm actually glad that this is one. I'm glad that this is a boring Doctor Who that we can see as opposed to just hear.
Yeah,
I mean that's not a rave review. They're not going to put that on the Blu-ray box, I don't think.
No. But not only is it, I mean, there's a lot of silent faffing around. There's a lot of going from the surface to the depths or from the depths to the surface.
Because almost nothing happens. I mean, It's like there's so little story that is combed across the 2.5 hours.
There are a couple of bits in this that really work. The villain.
I rather like episode 1.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, and the introduction to episode 1 is really good. There's good atmosphere, there's good use of model work, it feels creepy, the setup is good. The sparse location is not realistic, but it is creepy. The spinning console and the disorientating sounds, that feeling of dislocation.
Incursions into the TARDIS they feel disturbing at this point.
Well, I made a note that this feels very Twilight Zone.
Yes.
And that's something we've seen quite a bit in this period of Doctor Who.
Edge of Destruction the previous year as well. Yeah,
exactly.
Totally. Yeah.
There's still some of that going on. And so visually, it's
the doors opening and closing by themselves.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of that, and I think that's really interesting.
Sorry, again, just to slightly butt in on that, but the way that the series at this point portrays the TARDIS as both their domestic space, but a uncomfortable and at times alien one. It's like it's not just, but by the time we get to the Troughton era almost, it is just those 3 back walls and the console and the doors.
But you've
got all the other rooms in this, you've got their sleeping quarters, and so there's the idea that these characters have to live here, but that is hard and alien.
Yeah, which also leads, I think, the fact that those spaces are there leads to, it's a small part of what is a huge story, but it also leads to that interesting setup in the beginning in the first episode where it starts down very gendered lines. So basically, Vicky feels a bit faint, and Barbara is going to look after her and thinks about doing a spring clean, while the men go out and see what's going on and explore and that sort of thing. And that breaks down quite nicely later on, where Barbara is the one who leads the attack on the final base. So it's not like...
Well, the Doctor's unconscious, isn't he? And
Barbara,
the Doctor's asleep for the destruction of the Animus, isn't he?
Yeah, and it's basically what happens is that their fake attack, which was meant to lure the Zarbi out so that the Doctor and Vicky can get back inside and plant the kind of MacGuffin thing that can sort it all out. And that fake attack ends up having to turn into the real attack. And Barbara is absolutely in charge.
Yeah.
And they defer to her on almost everything, and indeed the planning, execution, etc., etc. She keeps them on board when they think the Doctor has betrayed them, which he, by accident, rather hilariously, has.
Yes.
But he didn't do it.
Yes, I mean, he's responsible for the sort of the wipeout of the first Menoptera.
The slaughter of the spearhead. It's basically because he's trying to keep the radio transmitter secret, but just at the point where
it goes off.
It goes off, and he doesn't try to switch it off or anything. He just sheepishly stands there while while the villain hears the entire plan of the opposing side. It's quite inadvertently funny, that bit.
Yeah, you got me.
And the other thing that I would say in its favour, is that the Menoptera who are enslaved having their wings cut off.
It's horrible.
It's really horrible.
It's a really horrible idea.
It's so horrible.
Yeah.
And you just weirdly feel for them. And again, the fact that they're dressed up in this quite psychedelic, not very realistic necessarily, but really committed, fully realised, and everyone's acting it straight.
And they're meant to be majestic as well, because then when you, like we said, I mean, obviously
because the flight's well handled.
A lot of care and attention has been put into them flying, and when one of them was it. Which way is Vrestin, isn't it? Who convinces the de-evolved ones that and they take her for a god, and it's the point where
she unfurls
the wings.
Yeah.
And it's like it's a genuinely impressive moment.
Yeah.
So then, the fact that the ones who are enslaved have had those wings cut off is really unpleasant.
It's deeply unpleasant, and
but also makes good use of what I mean. So the writer Bill Strutton of this said that he was inspired by seeing insects fight, and he thought that might be interesting. And he's the fact that it's all the stuff surrounding insects and our relationship with insects. So the cruelty of pulling wings off insects or something is here. What is literally happening in this work camp is
well, I think the fact that it is a forced labour camp, and that there is indentured labour, forced labour, and that they've had some essential element of their character denied them. I mean, I don't think this is only 20 years after the end of the Second World War. I think a lot of this stuff would have been in the minds of writers and directors and so on. So look, it's not like there's nothing here, but
I think the world building is pretty good. It's just that when they get there, there's nothing to do.
No,
and nothing happens.
No, and there isn't much of a plot. There's the bad guy villain. What's she called?
The Animus.
Yeah, the Animus.
Who's quite creepy.
Who's quite creepy and voiced brilliantly by Catherine Fleming. I know nothing more about her, but it's she's quite menacing. I would say
it's
generally
sort of psychedelic lava lamp type thing, whispering and hypnotizing people.
Yeah, kind of whispering tarantula thing, and the fact that it only communicates via this kind of disembodied circular piece of plastic which goes over the pair.
Which I love it when Hartnell says, "Bring that thing down, that hairdryer," or whatever.
Yeah.
Hartnell's giving it a good go in this.
Yeah, he's brilliant.
And again, episode 1, which I think is the one episode of this that actually I enjoyed and I didn't switch off during.
In episode 6, when he's in the web, he's broken and afraid, and he really sells that. And he's out of anything to do. And when he's finally caught up in Animus, that's it. He's out. He's got nothing left. He's just gonna basically die of old age right there and then, have the life force sucked out of him.
And the cliffhanger to episode 1 as well, when he clocks, when he says "my ship, my TARDIS," when he's on his own, he's not fronting in front of anyone else. And then there's this real moment where he realizes actually that they're properly screwed.
Yes,
which is in such contrast to. And it's not an original. I mean, we obviously praise Hartnell to the hilt every time, and you do realise in these moments of control and vulnerability that this received idea that Hartnell was a sort of batty old man fluffing his lines left, right, and centre is like, no, he was an actor doing a very good turn as a character who sometimes did that. So in episode,
he does fluff his lines a couple of times, but it was recorded as exactly.
A man in a giant ant suit wanders into the camera at one point and bumps his head. I mean,
it's like that's just how stuff was recorded those days.
Well, I did like the because this was a famously fraught production, I think, because the amount of moving parts that they had doing it. But when it refers to...
I do give some props to Richard Martin directing it.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean...
Some of the set-piece stuff is really impressive.
The fact that he did it, the fact they did it, and some of it looks really good, is I think, a credit to everyone involved. But, yeah, the recording for one of the episodes overran by an almost unprecedented 37 minutes, which I think tells you both about the chaos of production that would happen, but
and
also
the tight margins at the time.
Exactly, the tight margins at the time. I mean, it's like, it's not like a feature film overrunning for months or years or something.
No, I think I think it was, but I don't want to give the impression that we're sort of talking ourselves round.
No, and that's the disappointment.
This is bad.
I really wanted to like this. And I think in episode 1, I saw some seeds that this might be something that would be good. It's like weird and psychedelic, and as I say, I love the design work. I love the cast. I think everyone has brought their A game.
There's just nothing there.
Just nothing happens. I mean, it is just some slow plodding from one to sort of about 3 different locations.
And it's like you said, if it had been lost to us when we were listening and on 1.25 speed, again, I don't think taking this down to 4 episodes or 3 episodes or even 2 episodes is just there's just nothing there.
No, and that's the thing. I think Strutton is so interested in the aspects of the world building. So, I mean, to the point where I think, some of the dialogue that he gives to the creatures is incredibly overwrought. The idea the Optera, the sort of the de-evolved versions of the Menoptera who live underground, they refer to knocking holes in the wall, but they refer to giving the walls mouths so that they may speak light, which is, I imagine he must have written that line and then gone, great, I'm really nailing this stuff. I'm going to go for lunch now. It's the kind of dialogue that only a writer could love.
Look, I don't know much about Bill Strutton. I mean, I'm literally just looking up on Wikipedia, but credits including Ivanhoe, The Saint, The Avengers, and Doctor Who.
This is his only Doctor Who.
But just again, reading this now, he at the outbreak of the Second World War, he joined the Australian Army, and he was sent to Stalag 7.
Jesus.
So I mean, Stalag was all right. I mean, it was a prisoner of war camp. So but there were worse places to be.
Yeah.
But he said.
Not me a who though, is it?
Well, he said, this is a quote from him. He said, "My first year as a prisoner of war was the most interesting in my life. The ensuing 3 were the most boring, but more instructive, I think, than any university. I learned several languages. German from a Serbian horse doctor, Spanish from a Basque. A Parisian taxi driver bequeathed me a startling vocabulary." But yeah, he
lived a life.
It seems like, sorry, it was just that thinking about the camp aspects and the kind of forced labour and that kind of thing. It doesn't seem like it came out of nowhere, and it's interesting to read that there is a kind of biographical note there. It's just so irritating that it's just so dull.
It's so boring,
and it takes quite something for everyone to be bringing their A game, for the design to be so wacky and out there, for much of what's made this era of Doctor Who one of my favourites, and yet for it to just seem somehow to be so much less than the sum of its parts. And it's basically because a very thin idea has been stretched over too many episodes. Not really anything happens. And again, although I will give credit for things like the pulling of the wings and the kind of concentration labour camp stuff, and some of the atmosphere is
they're just details.
There's not actually a kind of theme. What's this about? If you were to say, okay, well, what's this about?
Well, Dennis Spooner thought it was a parable on socialism and the oppressor and worker classes, but I don't see that.
Well, that doesn't seem to work at all, because so who's oppressed here? I suppose the Zarbi are oppressed because they're controlled by the
animus.
But is that what he means?
I have no idea. I just read that.
Or is it
I've not gone further into
the slave labour of the Menoptera? But they seem in general to be quite kind of aristocratic in demeanour and
well, quite often
high regarding.
Quite often this era of Doctor Who nails its colours to the mast as to what it's about. We've talked before about how, across his career, certainly writing for Doctor Who, Terry Nation is determined to leave no aspect of the Second World War unexamined through all the different prisms you can view it through. And it's interesting, actually, you're talking about Strutton's wartime experiences and how, so many of the people writing and working on the show at this point will, depending on what age they were, will have had so much of their worldview shaped by the Second World War.
Oh, everyone.
And it leaches through in all sorts of fascinating ways, certainly throughout the Hartnell era, at this point where Doctor Who's still about something. But yeah, to me, this feels like it's more of a sort of, it's a writerly indulgence. It's that it feels to me like the sort of, I've always talked about how I'm quite allergic to fantasy novels that open with a map, because I always think, the level of detail and interest that has gone into creating the world and thinking about how they're going to speak and what their language might be way outstrips any thought that's been given to what these characters are actually going to do.
Exactly. I agree with that completely. I think that's the sad thing in a way, that you've actually got that work done. There's a lot there to quite like. They got a choreographer in to really sell the idea of the alien
by Rosalind de Winter.
Yeah. And indeed, the characters have their individual quirks, as you say, but nothing's done with it.